Rusty Streetman was an Isle of Palm City Council member for 4 years. Now he wants to return to City Council to tackle issues such as beach renourishment and shoal management. I talk one-on-one with Rusty for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Rusty Streetman, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hi, Quintin. Good to be with you again.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly, and I want to let the viewers know that initially I wanted to have a forum between you and the other runoff candidate, Susan Hill-Smith, but unfortunately she's under the weather, so I brought you back on for a solo interview. Needless to say, according to the Island Eye News, on Election Day, more than 3,100 votes were cast in the Isle of Palm City Council race, but none of the three candidates, including yourself, Susan Hill-Smith, and Josh Hooser, secured the majority on November 5th, leading to obviously a runoff. The two top vote getters, that is, were yourself and Susan Hill-Smith. And of course, you all will appear on that ballot again on November 19th. You received 1,270 votes, while Susan collected 1,164 votes. So tell me, what got you and Susan into a runoff?
Well, neither one of us had 50% plus one majority. So you have to have not a plurality, you have to have a majority in elections like this. So you have to have a clear-cut winner. So the top two, which was myself and Susan, advanced to a runoff. So that just added 2 more weeks to the election process.
Tell me, what is that process like for you as a runoff candidate now?
Well, it's one of those things that, you really want finality on election day. You'd like for things to be over. The general election, was held, and it was a very important national and state and county election cycle. And it would have been good, and I think probably relief for myself and Susan both had there been a clear-cut winner of the election on the regular general election day. So, it adds another 2 weeks of campaigning. It adds expense to the county, to the city, for having to have the polls open again on the 19th and have poll workers that work the polls. And it puts a strain on people who would like to early vote because they only have a couple of days to early vote, and they have to do it in North Charleston rather than close to Isle of Palms.
Wow. And
then absentee balloting is a very tight window also. So it just puts a lot more difficulty on everybody. And as a result, runoff elections traditionally have much lower turnout than a general election. So we won't have as many voters. The votes that you just mentioned a few minutes ago, it won't be nearly that many voters that will turn out for this, but hopefully we will have a very good turnout because Isle of Palms traditionally and historically turns out to vote very well, but it certainly will not be as much as in the general election.
And obviously, Rusty, you just mentioned about the early voting and the absentee voting. So how many people have early voted thus far for this particular runoff race?
Well, the last number I heard, and that was earlier today, was just over 20, and so that's not a lot of votes. It opened yesterday on Wednesday. Today's Thursday, so about midday today, I heard that someone had voted and said they were number 20, and I'm assuming that's number 20 in total, for the 2 days or for the day and a half. So it won't be a extremely large turnout, but I would encourage everybody, just as I'm sure Susan would, my opponent, that if you can get out to vote with us early or on November the 19th, please do so. It's very important that we exercise our right and our civil responsibility to vote.
And you also mentioned, too, Rusty, about those absentee voters. So how many of those so far?
I have no idea. In fact, you really don't know on that because you don't know how many applications have been mailed out. Early voting's a little easier to keep up with, only by someone just sends you a text or whatever, says, "Hey, I was number 20," and that's really the only way you know on that. As far as the absentee ballots that were mailed out so far, I have no idea. I had several people that inquired because they had children who are residents here on the Isle of Palms that are away at school. And they couldn't get back to vote, so they were trying to arrange to have an absentee ballot for them. But I just have no idea what that number would be, Quintin.
And you talk about, obviously, the people on the island. Let's just talk about the issues. First and foremost, the state of the Isle of Palms in your mind is?
I think the state of the Isle of Palms is wonderful. We have a great island here that we live on. I've been here for 40 years. Susan has been here for 30 years. And I don't think either of us would have stayed here this long if it wasn't a great place to live, work, and play. That's for sure. But I mean, we have we have a beautiful residential island for the most part that does have a resort on it up in Wild Dunes, and it has a very vibrant front beach business district with cafes, restaurants, music, and it has 7 miles of wonderful beach that people can enjoy from around the Low Country and from around the state and from around the world, actually. And we have great waterways that are part of that also. The intercoastal waterway, the creeks, the marshes. It's really the best place that I can think of to ever live. And I've lived all over the state of South Carolina. I'm a South Carolinian from the upstate, but I've been here for most of my life for the past 40 years. And this is home to us, and we'll never leave here.
What is the biggest difference about the Isle of Palms from 40 years ago to right now?
Yeah, for one thing, it was a lot more quaint then. I mean, you had a lot more J.C. Long houses, the
Yes.
small 4-room houses, concrete block, much more of that. Population was less, obviously. We're at about 4,200 people here, permanent population now. But back when we moved here in the 80s, mid 80s, this is a guess, it would have been somewhere probably around, I'm guessing 2,500 to 3,000 people, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's a guesstimate at this point. But you pretty much got to know everybody. I mean, it was like more of a situation there where you had tourists here because we had short term rentals and all even then. But it just seemed to be a little more. Families had been here for quite a long time and had raised their kids here, and so you got to know people, I think, a lot quicker back in the day.
Wow. Obviously, you mentioned that permanent, population, and that's going to be there forever. Obviously, it's not like the Isle of Palms can grow like the other areas in the Low Country. So, in your mind, how do you invite, day trippers and locals to come without interrupting that population?
Quentin, I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that.
No worries, no
Yeah,
worries.
could repeat that.
Yes, sir. So I understand with the population that you have right now, the Isle of Palms is permanent. That can't grow because the Isle of Palms is a relatively small island. So
Mhm.
how do you grow within that small growth that you have?
Well, when we say we can't grow, I mean, we certainly could grow a little more population wise. We can't grow size wise
Right.
because we're on a barrier island. So geographically, we are confined to this small island. But we do have situations that exist where people do remodel homes, where they replace homes. And we also have, right now, we have more families moving in, basically. In fact, I just saw some county numbers that were adjusted from 2023,
Right.
and we added 16 single family residences on this island. Now, in the past, they might have been, I don't know if they were rental homes or if they were just vacant lots or what, probably vacant lots. But those homes that have been built there, 16 of those were registered as single family residences, which is a 4% tax base,
Right.
which means that they are going to be a resident that lives here on the island. So we can grow population wise some, but I don't ever see this island having a permanent population that's going to grow significantly. We just can't do it with the geographic boundaries we have.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I want to break down a couple of those things that you just mentioned, Rusty. So how many vacant lots do you have right now on the Isle of Palms?
Don't know for sure. Don't want to take a guess on that. There's very few, but I mean there are some here, and most of them are just scattered around the island in different places. Some inside Wild Dunes, some outside the gates,
Huh.
and it seems like every time you turn around, you see one that's being developed, cleared, and a home put on that. But there still are a number of them left that you can find around the island, and the owners, for the most part, do a good job of keeping those lots in pretty good shape too. They don't necessarily let them get very unkempt.
Right.
We have code our code enforcement people make sure that they keep those looking pretty good.
Absolutely. And I want to get back to that in just a second. But let me ask you, well, since you can't grow the population permanently because of those geographical boundaries, what areas of the island can actually be rezoned for residential?
Uh, well, you really couldn't do that the way we're set up,
Mm,
Quentin. We have very distinctive and clear cut areas of the island that are designated such that it would be extremely difficult without an act by council to rezone anything
mm,
to more residential.
mm.
You know, we have our business district up
True.
there and the commercial areas there. And of course, it's just not. We're not set up on this island to have more development and more residential that's being added as a result.
And let me ask you this, Dan. Currently, how many single family homes do you have on the island?
Let's see. I think, if I'm not mistaken, is our latest number of total dwelling units that are
Oh,
single
yes.
family is 3,129.
Wow.
That's the latest numbers that I see here, based on I think that's through September,
Yes,
basically.
sir.
Okay.
So, when you look at those numbers, Rusty, how do you compare that year to date?
How do you compare
Yeah,
that? What
yeah, year to date.
year to date? I mentioned earlier that we added 16 single family residences from last year.
Mm,
So at one time, so we would have had 3,113 if those numbers are correct. And we
wow.
added 16 single family residences. Now,
That's
total dwellings on the
yeah.
island, we have 4,532.
Wow.
Now, that includes townhouses,
Mm,
duplexes, and triplexes that were
wow.
built years ago,
Mm,
condominiums, and then commercial condos, which is kind of like a hotel sort of thing
yes.
that it's been divided into condos rather than hotel rooms. So
Mm,
that's 4,532 total units.
wow. Now, okay. Do you all have enough land left for something like that to keep occurring on the island?
Well, we've got enough land to accommodate what we have,
Mm,
and again, we do still have some vacant lots, that homes can be built on.
mm.
The vacant lots we have scattered around the island, they're not commercial in nature. I mean,
I
it's
see.
not, they're residential. So there are places that homes could be built,
Mm.
but it wouldn't be uh, adaptable to commercial interest, basically.
And I know I'm asking you all of this because I know we talked off camera about obviously the big topics around the island, and something you mentioned to me was about short-term rentals.
Uh-huh.
So, as we sit here right now, how many of those are actually on the island currently?
Right now, we have, let's see, our percentage of short term rentals is showing 38%.
Wow.
So we like to say we're one third short term rentals, one third permanent residents, one third second homeowners.
Mm,
Our raw percentage right now says that we have 38% short term rentals, but you really do need to take out the townhouses, the condominiums, and those things that were built for rental.
mm,
Outside the gate, down in the front beach area, uh, behind in Wild Dunes,
right.
there are townhomes and condominiums that are built there, and they were built basically for rentals. So if you carve that out,
Mm.
it's a much lower number.
Wow. Wow. This might be a silly question, Rusty, but how many of those houses that were built years ago for those rentals are just now coming on to the tax roll or whatever the case may be?
Well, they've been on the tax roll if they were built for short-term rentals. Now, what's
Mm,
happened in some cases is that it works both ways, really. But there are homes that were rentals historically that
mm,
now are single-family residences. So they switched from a rental home
mm,
to that is at 6% tax base to a permanent resident, which is 4% tax base.
right.
Matter of fact, I live in one. I bought the home that I'm in currently, and it was a rental home. So now it's my permanent residence.
Right.
So that one came off the rental market, the one I'm living in now. And we seem to have more of that going on now. When I talk to realtors, property
Right.
managers, the people that are moving to this island now, we're having more families come on the island, and we also have more second homes.
Right.
But we do not have what we would call institutional investment type brokers that are coming in and buying up property for short term rentals. And one reason we don't have that, a big reason, as a matter of fact, is there's no return on investment. Our property is so expensive out here, Quintin, that you cannot buy a home here to rent it with the limitations that we wisely put on the number of occupants that can be in a rental home. You know, now we have an occupancy level limit of 12 that can be in a rental home, and we could have no more cars on the property overnight. Right. The number of bedrooms. So if it's a 4-bedroom home, you could have 4 cars. 5-bedroom, which a lot of rentals are, 5 cars. Right. That doesn't mean they might not have more cars during the day when people are visiting, but still, that's kind of that's the factors that were put in place wisely by previous council members or previous council years ago to kind of limit that to keep us from having the mega mansions. We do have a number of homes that were built years ago that accommodate more people than that. They really are what you'd call a mega mansion. And some of those are grandfathered. I don't know how many exactly there are, but there's a number of them on Front Beach, a few on Palm Boulevard that fit that criteria, and that they were grandfathered in because they were sold the way they were, and they can have occupancy larger than the 12 that we now have in place.
And let me ask you this: how many resident occupied homes are actually available now?
How many resident occupied homes are what?
Available right now?
Oh, I don't know for sure how tight the market is right offhand. I'd have to ask realtor friends and some of those folks that are involved in that business. And my take on it is that this is a pretty tight market out here. It's not, there's not a lot up for sale at this point.
Wow. How many days are actually allowed for these short-term rentals to be actually rented on the island?
Well, short-term rental, I mean, you can rent that year round if you want to by the week. You could rent it, 2 weeks you could also, I think, rent a short-term rental up to a month or so. Wow. But most of the short-term rentals we have out here on a weekly basis. And, of course, an owner of a home out here too can also rent their home for up to 72 days and still be a permanent resident and a 4% property.
Right. With all of that's going on right now with the short-term rentals and the townhomes and the condos, what is the actual tax base on the Isle of Palms?
Well, I tell you what, the short-term rentals we have here is a perfect balance, I think. We have somewhere around 1/3 short-term rentals. It literally is the goose that lays the golden egg. We have the tax base and revenue that we receive from short-term rentals keeps this island very healthy financially. Right. It helps us pay for the fire department salaries and equipment, etc. Police department, public works, helps us keep up a lot of the areas of the island, the beach paths and things like that. Also get to take advantage of those dollars as well. And it really would be, if we didn't have the short-term rentals in place that we do, and that revenue went away, our taxes would be extremely high on this island. Right now, Isle of Palms has the lowest tax rates of any municipality around the low country here. And really that's because of the short-term rental situation. And we don't have, contrary to what a few say, that want to revisit the short-term rental cap issue, I've been firmly against that all last year and in this campaign, unlike my opponents were. They want to revisit the short-term cap issue, start the discussion again, and saying, okay, even though the referendum defeated that last fall, we want to come back to that and see if we can talk to others about maybe installing a cap across the island or in certain areas of the island. I think that's the wrong thing to do, particularly in light of the referendum being defeated by our residents by a 55 to 45% difference, or 230 votes. And in the political world, that's a landslide. That's a mandate that says, we don't want a cap on short-term rentals. We just want you, the city council, to monitor short-term rentals, manage livability issues, and make sure we don't have a situation where we have too many short-term rentals. And our numbers simply have just not changed much at all in a decade, other than it's actually been leaning more towards more family-oriented and second homes than short-term rentals.
And the rain's coming down again. But let me ask you this quickly. With that referendum that obviously the voters spoke out against and say, hey, we don't want it as far as the short-term rental cap.
Right.
Did you believe that the language was kind of confusing for some of the voters?
The referendum was a referendum. It was a citizen-generated referendum. They got the necessary signatures to put it on the ballot last year, and they wanted a cap of 1,600 units. It got defeated, 55 to 45%. That was the question. There was no other question other than that. By it being defeated that way, we can't just turn around, in my opinion, and say, okay, just because the residents voted down 1,600 as a cap, that doesn't mean we can't go back and start talking about it again. I mean, our residents spoke very clearly that they did not want to have the cap in place for short-term rentals, and they wanted the council to continue to monitor short-term rentals as we had been doing and still are doing, staying on top of it and making sure that we enforce any livability issues that we have. Gosh, we do monthly reports on livability.
Right.
We have as many, if not more, livability issues that get filed on residents as we do short-term rentals. So it's not a problem either way. We're not overcome by complaints of any kind, because this is a great island. Most people behave themselves.
Yes, right.
But we don't have it, leaning one way or the other, where we have a very noisy or a problematic short-term rental situation. It's just simply not there. And for us to go back and say, well, and my opponents had done this, and Susan is of this mindset. I wish she was here to defend herself a little bit on it, but she's clearly been on record and still on record that she would be open to next year revisiting the short-term rental cap issue. And I'm simply not there, and I don't think most citizens want that either, since they voted it down.
Would they actually have the votes on council for that?
Would they actually what?
Would they have the actual votes for that on council?
I think if Susan got elected, they would. I think there's 4 people on council right now that would favor having that discussion. And I think there's 4 on council right now that would not be in favor of having that discussion. So council is split. And of course, the 8 that is there now includes the mayor.
Right.
So whoever takes his seat, myself or Susan, will be the 9th. If I'm on council, I am going to be against revisiting the short-term rental issue and the caps. If Susan gets elected, per her record, her stated statements on her platform, she would be open to revisiting that. So she would be the 5th vote in my mind to reopen those discussions. I would be the 5th vote if I get elected to say, no, we're not going to reopen those discussions. We're going to continue to monitor short-term rentals, and we're going to honor the will of the people that voted it down just last fall.
And I hope, if she gets better, I hope to get her back on Quintin's post office to get her side of the story on this short-term cap issue. But where do they want these people who are in favor of revisiting this referendum? Where exactly do they want the city to actually monitor these livability issues in the short-term rentals?
Well, we get reports every month. The same group, all of city council see these reports that we get each month. It's an entire deck that they cover and have available to them in the workshop. It's public information.
Right.
Anybody that wants to, resident or not, can pull that right up on isleofpalms.net and see all of the charts and graphs and statistics that are out there. So it's there's nothing there. There's no hidden agenda. All the information is there. It's just a matter of whether whether someone wants what they want to do with that information. Statistics are sometimes can be a little misleading depending on the way you frame that the argument or whatever. But it's very clear when I see the monthly reports that we get that we don't have a runaway short-term rental issue. We don't have excessive livability complaints on short-term rentals, and we're in a good place because it keeps us prosperous on this island with the revenues that it generates. And quite honestly, if we did something like cap short-term rentals, I'm of the firm belief that it would adversely affect property values on the island. And it also goes against what I consider property rights of an individual homeowner. If you try to dictate to them as to whether they can have a short-term rental or not and put a cap on it, particularly when we don't have an issue.
If that were to be the case, how many people do you believe, short-term renters, do you believe will the island actually lose?
Well, I don't know. If you put a cap on it, what's going to happen is you're going to have people that begin to hoard licenses that they don't even rent their homes right now. They just have a short-term rental license just in case,
right?
And they want to protect their property for their heirs going forward. So you may have people that just hang on to licenses just to have them, even though they have no intention of renting their home.
Right.
If you put a cap in and someone has a piece of property and they want to rent their house, they may be on a waiting list, like they are on Folly Beach. Yeah, well, they can't even get a short-term rental license because the cap is $800 over there, and so it can have all kinds of consequences if we're not careful. We have a lot of people out here. I run into them all the time that they've had these homes for years and they rent it out a little bit to pay the mortgage and the taxes, and they want to make sure they're living in it, but they want to be able to pass it along to their heirs also, their children or grandchildren,
Cool.
So that they can either sell it or use it themselves, and we have quite a number of people who are second homeowners who have bought homes down here in the past. They rent them out, pay the mortgage. Pay the mortgage, pay the taxes, which are exorbitant, 3 times more what the normal resident would pay, and they hope someday to move into this home permanently and make it their permanent residence when they're able to do so financially or they retire. A lot of people are that way also, that they are paying for their second home here and just barely getting by, not making a lot of money on it, but making sure that they pay the mortgage, the taxes, etc. And then with the hopes that someday when they retire from their job, if they live elsewhere, they'll be able to live here and retire on Isle of Palms.
And one last question for you, Rusty. How many people are with license? Well, how many licenses are there with those short-term applications for the city of Isle of Palms?
How many licenses are there?
Yes, sir. With applications.
Let's see. I think I mentioned that. I think right now it's showing that there's, 1,780 licenses in place.
Wow.
And again, that's licenses that includes single family residences, townhouses, condominiums, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
The way it breaks out, Quintin, like the latest numbers I see, single family residences, 27% of them have a short-term rental license, 27%. That doesn't mean that 27% of them are renting that, but they have the license just in case. And if they're not renting it, it's like an extra tax to them.
Right.
40% of the townhomes have short-term rental licenses. 37% of the triplexes and duplexes have short-term rental licenses. And get this, condominiums, 65% have short-term rental license, but they're built to be rented for the most part. And then commercial condos, I think that's a hotel that got converted to the condos, that's 100%. I think that's really one property basically that's affected up on Front Beach, but it has I think 119 dwelling units in it, and each one of them have a license.
There you go. Yes, sir. Well, I really thank you for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups again. And if Susan gets well, like I said earlier, hopefully she can get back on before the election on Tuesday. But Rusty Streetman, thank you for your time here on Quintin's Close-Ups.
Quintin, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.